When giants roamed the ice, Earth's forgotten frozen beasts. Across a frozen earth, the wind once carried the thunder of enormous feet. Mammoths moved like living mountains, woolly rhinoceroses grazed beneath veils of snow, and giant ground sloths shaped the frozen plains. This was a world of strength and cold beauty, a land where survival meant enduring endless winter. Yet beneath the ice, time was already turning against them. The giants began to fade, leaving bones beneath melting frost and questions buried in permafrost. What ended their reign, and could it happen again? Step into the age when ice ruled the world. Mammoths in the mist. They emerged like memories half-formed, shapes moving within pale vapour. The air is heavy with ice and silence. Across the endless tundra, shaggy silhouettes sway and vanish into fog, their tusks gleaming like the ribs of the frozen earth. These are the mammoths, ghosts of an age when cold ruled the world, when the horizon itself seemed carved from breath. Once, the mammoth steppe stretched from France to Alaska, a living ocean of grass and wind. It was a realm built on endurance. Bitter winters, brief summers, a rhythm of death and renewal that shaped every creature upon it. The mammoth was its heartbeat, its gardener, its great engineer, trampling snow, spreading seeds, turning soil. Beneath their tread, the frozen plains awakened. When they moved, the world itself seemed to shift. Their bodies were masterpieces of design against the cold. Beneath the tangled fur lay layers of protection, fat, hide, and hair woven into a fortress of warmth. Tiny ears hugged close to skulls. Blood flowed through special channels that kept trunks and extremities from freezing. Tusks curved in vast spirals, not only for combat, but for craft used to dig through snow, to lift branches, to guide calves. Every motion was an act of survival, honed by millennia of wind and frost. The herd was a nation, matriarchs led with memories older than rivers, steering through blizzards toward buried grasses known only to them. Mothers surrounded their calves in storms, touching trunks in reassurance. Their calls, deep and resonant, rolled for miles through mist, a language of rumbles and longing that no ice could silence. They mourned their dead, lingered near the bones of kin, and when danger neared, they gathered close, a living fortress of hair, muscle, and intent. Archaeologists find their echoes still. In Siberia's Yana River basin, a calf known as yucca was found with auburn hair, flesh soft beneath a surgeon's blade after 40,000 years. The Berezovka mammoth, discovered frozen upright in permafrost, still held wildflowers in its mouth, its last meal intact, its final breath captured in ice. To unearth them is to trespass upon time itself, to touch a world paused mid-motion. When the ice melts, the past exhales, and what it releases feels unnervingly alive. Their extinction was neither swift nor singular. As the ice age waned, forests crept northward, and the open plains began to die. The great herds retreated to shrinking sanctuaries, Wrangel Island, the Taimyr Peninsula, until isolation broke them. Some survived thousands of years beyond their kin, smaller, quieter, the last verses of an ancient song. When they vanished, they took with them the rhythm of a landscape that depended on their strength. Without their trampling and grazing, grasses gave way to moss, soil locked in frost, and the steppe's vast heartbeat slowed to silence. With their absence, snow lingered longer on the ground, reflecting sunlight into the sky, a subtle shift that chilled the planet's skin. Humans had walked among them. Hunters watched the herds through storms and hunger, striking with flint and courage when the chance came. But they were also storytellers, shaping mammoths from ochre and bone, not only as prey, but as symbols of reverence. On cave walls, mammoths still move in torchlight, their outlines trembling with the breath of their makers. In the rhythm of those ancient lines, we glimpse admiration rather than dominance, an understanding that survival once meant coexistence with giants. Today, their ghosts rise again in melting tundra, in museum halls, in the genetic laboratories of the curious. Scientists trace their DNA like a lost hymn, mapping the blueprint of an age that no longer exists. There are dreams of bringing them back to cold grasslands reborn, of shadowed herds beneath the aurora once more. Yet, even if we rebuild their flesh, we cannot summon the world that made them. The air, the silence, the endless steppe, those too are extinct. The fog thickens, and the last mammoth moves away, its form dissolving into white. For a heartbeat, the tundra holds its breath, as if remembering what it once contained. Then the wind returns, soft and endless, carrying with it the faint echo of tusks through snow. The world exhales and continues. The woolly rhinoceros, fury in the blizzard. The woolly rhinoceros did not hide from the cold. It met the ice age head-on, thriving in winds that stripped flesh from the weak. With thick fur, massive shoulders, and a horn shaped for both defense and dominance, it carved a life across the Eurasian steppe. This was no silent wanderer of snow, it was a force, built to endure and to fight, across plains now buried beneath permafrost, its tracks once cut deep into frozen soil. Herds moved methodically, following the scent of dry grasses and the memory of migration routes etched into instinct. Their world was not white silence, but sound and movement, the crunch of hooves, the snort of breath, the clash of horns when rivals met. These were creatures of certainty, their power measured not by speed, but by persistence. Their bodies were landscapes of survival. A dense coat of coarse hair trapped heat close to their skin, while a layer of fat insulated them from killing winds. The hump above their shoulders stored reserves for lean months, when snow sealed away the ground's meagre offerings. Their horns, broad, flattened, and carried forward, served not only as weapons but as tools, sweeping snow aside to uncover grass. In the Ice Age, function was beauty. Every line of their frame existed to defy extinction. Somewhere between aggression and adaptation lay the secret of their success. The woolly rhinoceros lived where few others dared, grazing through storms that turned mammoths away. It was no solitary beast. Evidence suggests loose herds, bound not by hierarchy, but by necessity. Their strength was communal endurance. When predators circled, they did not flee, they turned outward, horns aligned like a wall of spears. Against cave lions or dire wolves, that unity was enough. Yet their battles were not only with flesh. The true enemy was the Ice Age itself, its shifting moods dictating every birth and death. In warmer intervals, forests crept northward, stealing the open plains the rhinos depended on. In colder ages, glaciers swallowed their paths entirely. Each generation adapted to a changing line between survival and starvation. They were creatures of the threshold, living at the edge of what life could bear. Then came humanity, not as hunters at first, but as witnesses. Early people carved their image into cave walls, the silhouette of the great horn, the sloping back, the shag of its coat rendered in ochre and charcoal. These drawings were precise, observational, even reverent. The people who made them had shared the same wind, the same fear, the same hunger. To draw the woolly rhinoceros was to remember the presence of something formidable, something equal. But memory was not protection. As climates warmed and grasslands receded, the herds began to vanish. Hunting may have hastened it, though the evidence suggests a slower fade habitat collapsing beneath their hooves, seasons no longer matching their needs. What once was an empire of frost became a patchwork of refuge and ruin. The great horns fell silent in the snow. Even in death, they refused to disappear. Frozen carcasses have been found in Siberian ice, their coats still matted with dust, their horns still marked by use. One was so intact that the curve of its mouth suggested the ghost of breath. These remains are not fossils of imagination, but bodies preserved by the same cold that once sustained them. Through them, we meet time face to face. In their story, we glimpse the logic of endurance stripped to its essence. Life thrives not because it conquers the world, but because it bends without breaking. The woolly rhinoceros did not evolve for glory or dominance. It evolved for weather, for hunger, for persistence. And yet, even that iron resilience had a limit. When the last of them fell, the cold itself began to lose its hold. Grasslands withdrew, rivers thawed, and the world turned toward a different rhythm. What survived remembered them only in pigment and bone. But to imagine their breath steaming in the pale sun is to sense how close power and fragility can live together. They are gone, yet not forgotten. The shape of their horn remains etched in ice, in myth, in memory, in their place. Silence returned to the plains, but not peace. In that silence, something else began to move quiet, patient, and hungry, watching the frozen world for its moment to strike. The cave lion's silent kingdom. It moved when the wind fell silent. Across the frozen steppe, while herds drifted in restless sleep, the cave lion began its hunt. Not built for endurance like the rhinoceros, nor for patience like the wolf. It lived in moments of swift precision. Its world was measured in muscle and silence, in the span between heartbeat and strike. Beneath its pale fur lay the power of survival honed by scarcity. The Ice Age was not kind to predators. Hunger ruled their blood. To live meant to move through shadows, to read the trembling of air, to know when snow meant concealment or betrayal. The cave lion's strength was not in its roar, but in its restraint. It waited, motionless, until the world itself seemed to forget it existed. It ruled not through presence, but through absence. Its tracks alone were enough to clear scavengers from a kill site miles away. These lions were giants, larger than any cat that would follow. Males bore faint manes, not the golden crowns of savannas, but coarse ridges blending into frost and dusk. Their coats were dense, muted, built for silence more than display. When they moved, the snow did not protest. Even their paws spoke softly. They were the ghosts of the tundra hunters, shaped by cold and quiet. The prey was not helpless. Mammoths, bison, and woolly rhinos all carried the means to kill, but weakness was seasonal. The cave lion learned to follow exhaustion. Calves born too soon, stragglers separated in a storm, and an injured adult that slowed the herd. These were the moments when balance tipped, when strength faltered, and instinct answered. Each kill was brief, brutal, and necessary. There was no cruelty in it, only survival. In the dark mouths of caves, entire prides once gathered. The bones tell of cooperation. Males and females sharing the same ground. Cubs nestled between the ribs of hunted prey. Their dens were both refuge and memory. The walls bear claw marks and soot, the residue of time mixed with charcoal drawings left by human hands. Some of these paintings show lions in pursuit, their flanks stretched, their eyes fixed forward. The artists who drew them had watched those hunts. They understood both fear and admiration. Where the cave lion hunted, the rhythm of life adjusted herds, shifted migration routes. Wolves lingered at the edges, and scavengers waited for the echoes of its passing. Nocturnal light spilled into those caves in thin blue ribbons. Here, the boundary between human and beast blurred. To paint a lion on stone was to borrow its power, to acknowledge its rule over darkness. In these images, we glimpse not a monster but a teacher, an emblem of focus, patience, and precision. The Ice Age world did not separate reverence from survival. It honored what it feared. The remains we find now tell quieter stories. Frozen skulls unearthed in Siberia reveal teeth still sharp, muscles once immense. In some, traces of fur linger like whispers of warmth. They speak of a lineage that stretched from the tundra to Africa, adapted again and again, until time itself became the only predator that could not be escaped. The cave lion's disappearance was not sudden. It dimmed like a fire left untended. As prey numbers dwindled and rival hunters grew bolder, even the silence that once protected the cave lion turned against it. Hunger broke its stillness, and the world heard its end. As the ice retreated, forests reclaimed the plains. The open steppe that once echoed with pursuit closed into thickets and shadows too dense for great cats to thrive. Smaller hunters replaced them, nimble and numerous, feeding on what the giants left behind. The cave lion faded into memory, its strength no longer matched by its world. Yet its shadow lingers in our imagination. In stories whispered around ancient fires, in symbols carved into bone and ivory, it survives as more than a hunter. It became a reminder of what it meant to live with awareness, to move unseen, to act only when the world demanded it. The rhythm of its life, that delicate balance of stillness and strike, remains a part of what we call instinct. Silence closes over its story once more. The snow drifts, the caves darken, the bones rest beneath ice that remembers everything. Somewhere in that long memory, a lion still waits not alive, but not gone either. Its shape lingers in the dark, patient as the world turns toward warmth again. The steppe bison thunder beneath the aurora. Across the boundless plains of the Ice Age, motion itself was a language. The earth trembled with each collective step, a slow and endless drumbeat that marked the rhythm of survival. Beneath a sky veiled in frozen breath, herds of steppe bison advanced like living weather, their silhouettes blurred by frost and distance. They were not hunters or wanderers, but the pulse of the tundra, the ancient architects of its pathways, the sculptors of its silence, the thunder that never truly ceased. Their bodies were monuments to endurance. Massive shoulders rose like hills beneath thick woolen coats that carried the scent of snow and crushed sedge. Horns curved forward in dark, deliberate arcs, symbols of both defense and continuity. To look upon a steppe bison was to see the weight of time itself given form, muscle layered over memory, strength refined by cold and scarcity. They lived not for conquest, but for long survival, their lives shaped by the same wind that carved the plains into corridors of white and shadow. When the storms arrived, they did not scatter. The wind howled, snow blinded the horizon, and yet the herd pressed on, shoulder to shoulder, their bodies forming a wall against the rage of the season. Each step sank deep but steady. Each breath steamed into the void and vanished, only to return as mist among countless others. In that unity, there was safety, not the fragile peace of stillness, but the durable calm of motion, a discipline born from necessity. The predators learned this rhythm well. Wolves shadowed the outskirts, cave lions waited for the weak, and even early humans read the patterns of the herd's migration as if deciphering the script of survival itself. To the bison, the steppe was not an expanse, but a memory that moved beneath their hooves. They traced ancient routes between rivers and ridges, following the ghost lines of vegetation buried beneath ice and wind. Theirs was a journey not measured by destination, but by endurance, each season a rehearsal of the last, each birth a continuation of an unbroken design. In the pale half-light of the aurora, their eyes reflected green fire, their backs dusted with frost that glimmered like starlight fallen to earth. To witness them was to glimpse the heartbeat of the Ice Age, patient, rhythmic, and profoundly alive. The earth remembered their passing. Beneath layers of permafrost lie the impressions of their hooves, preserved like punctuation marks in the grammar of the ancient steppe. Their skulls, unearthed from the cold ground, reveal ridges of bone dense with the history of muscle and strain, tangible proof of a life spent resisting the world's indifference. Each horn carried the record of years endured, of winters survived, of storms turned aside. Their deaths were seldom dramatic. They faded not in a single moment, but in the slow withdrawal of an ecosystem unraveling around them. As the Ice Age waned, the plains began to change. The winds grew softer, the grasses shorter, the horizons closer. Where once the bison moved in herds that stretched beyond sight, the land fractured into forests and wetlands that stifled their passage. The steppe, their cathedral of motion, became a maze of green and shadow. Slowly, inevitably, they disappeared from Eurasia, leaving behind only bones, prints, and echoes. But extinction did not claim their entire lineage. A few crossed the land bridge that connected Asia to North America, and there, in a new world, they found continuation. The modern bison still carries the memory of that crossing, the same deep chest, the same bowed head, the same capacity for endurance in the face of change. In them, the Ice Age breathes still. When thunder rolls across the North American plains, it is an echo of those ancient migrations beneath the aurora. Their silhouettes against the twilight sky recall the ghosts that once moved beneath curtains of green fire, and for a fleeting moment, the distance between past and present collapses. The steppe bison's story is not only one of survival, but of persistence beyond time, a life form that refused to vanish entirely, that found a way to keep moving even when the world it knew dissolved. Now, in the silence of the far north, where wind still combs through frost-stiff grasses and the light dances in spectral veils, the memory of that thunder endures. The herd may be gone, but the rhythm remains deep, patient, and unbroken. It hums beneath the frozen soil, waiting for the listener who can still hear it. For in every echo that rolls across the tundra, the steppe bison moves again, unseen but alive within the memory of the earth. The woolly camel, ghost of the Arctic sands. Silence once ruled the Arctic plains, broken only by the muted crunch of hooves across frozen soil. In that quiet kingdom moved a creature shaped by absence rather than abundance, the woolly camel. Its long limbs carried it between horizons of pale dust and ice, where even the light seemed brittle. Alone or in sparse groups, it travelled across the tundra's wide solitude, tracing paths that blurred between continents. Its body spoke the language of extremes. Broad, padded feet prevented it from sinking into snow as easily as its desert kin avoided sand. Humps stored not water, but the memory of energy, a biological trust fund for famine and frost. Beneath its dense coat lay a system built for survival, its blood rich with oxygen to endure cold, its lashes thick enough to defy storms. Few animals carried such a paradox in their design. Born of warmth, yet thriving in cold, it stood as a bridge between two worlds. When drought and snow alternated across Ice Age steppes, the woolly camel navigated them with quiet certainty. Its ancestors had known deserts, but evolution re-sculpted them into masters of ice. Long before humps rose under blazing suns, they rose beneath auroras. The camel's story was never bound to a single climate. It was the narrative of adaptation itself, written across millennia of shifting ground. To walk where it once roamed is to stand on a landscape of illusions. The tundra today hides its deserts beneath frost, yet the bones of camels still rest there, ribs like buried arches beneath permafrost, skulls locked in frozen loam. Each discovery reminds us that even the Arctic was once a crossroads. These fossils whisper of migrations so vast that geography loses meaning. From North America to Eurasia, herds crossed land bridges now drowned by time. The woolly camel's movements followed the rhythm of necessity. It grazed on lichens and sedges, scraping nourishment from scarcity. Winters demanded constant motion. Stillness meant starvation. Summer offered brief abundance, a season of green breath, before the cold reclaimed everything. In these cycles, life did not fight the frost, it harmonized with it. Predators learned to follow their path. Wolves, lions, and early humans all recognized its value not as a trophy, but as sustenance. The camel's meat and hide were gifts from a world that gave rarely and took often. Evidence of butchery marks found on ancient bones tells of encounters that were both practical and profound. To hunt a creature of such resilience was to confront nature's will directly. It required patience equal to the prey's persistence, and in that struggle, survival mirrored survival. When the climate turned once more, the balance unraveled. Ice withdrew, and the world grew wetter. Forests advanced where steppe once sprawled, closing the open routes that camels depended upon. Food thinned, predators multiplied, and the great wanderers began to vanish. Some crossed southward into warmer lands, evolving again into the camels we know stripped of their wool but carrying the same endurance. Others simply faded, their bloodline ending in silence beneath melting ice. Their extinction was quiet, almost dignified. No cataclysm ended them, no singular disaster, only the slow betrayal of time. The earth's warmth, once their ally, became their undoing. Yet they left behind a legacy written in the persistence of their descendants. Every desert camel carries within its blood the memory of frost, the echo of hooves once striking ice instead of sand. Their story reminds us that survival is not permanence, but transformation. Unearthing their frozen remains in the far north, scientists move with a reverence reserved for the long dead. Each bone, each tuft of preserved fur, tells of a creature that walked the threshold between epochs. The woolly camel's world no longer exists, yet its image bridges the extremes, cold and heat, past and present, death and endurance. No single age could claim it. Still, its shadow endures beneath the Arctic sands. The woolly camel was not merely a traveller through time, but a witness to the earth's restless heart, adapting, changing, and continuing long after its body was gone. Its ghost remains, not in haunting, but in quiet remembrance of everything that survives by learning to begin again. The cave bear, dreaming in stone, deep inside the mountain, where light dissolves into breath, the air still remembers them. The walls are smooth with the touch of fur and time, their surfaces glazed by the slow exhale of centuries. Bones rest in the half-dark, vast and deliberate, as if arranged by the cave itself. Here, the cave bear lingers not as a ghost, but as a shape within silence, a monument to stillness carved by sleep. They were creatures of immense presence, yet they lived in withdrawal. Unlike the lion or the bison, whose power belonged to motion, the cave bear's dominion was over stillness. Each winter, it surrendered its pulse to the earth, curling into the hollows of stone as the world above vanished beneath snow. Hibernation was not escape, it was mastery, a suspension of hunger, warmth, and fear. The caves that sheltered them were archives of that surrender. Some chambers bear deep grooves where claws sharpened on rock, others show the polished smoothness of 1,000 sleeping flanks. The floor is layered with generations of denning the dust of crushed bone, the glint of mineral frost. Above, ancient stalactites hang like frozen timepieces, dripping in the rhythm of forgotten winters. To stand there is to feel the intimacy of their existence, enormous beings folded into spaces smaller than their strength should have allowed. In life, they must have seemed like mountains in motion. Their shoulders rose higher than a man's head, their skulls thick and deliberate, their teeth blunted by the slow diet of roots and berries. They were omnivores turned mostly herbivorous, feeding on the tough vegetation that clung to the Ice Age slopes. Yet their power remained unquestioned. Few would have challenged them even in scarcity. The cave bear was not a predator, but an authority, one that needed only its size and silence to command respect. Theirs was a world balanced on survival's smallest margins. As the ice thickened, vegetation waned, and each winter stretched longer than the last, a species adapted to retreat found itself with less to return to. When spring came late, or not at all, hunger crept even into the caves. Fossil records reveal cubs that never woke, adults that starved in sleep, and families entombed in the same season that once preserved them. Extinction, for the cave bear, arrived like a dream that refused to end. Yet their memory endured where others faded. Human hands found their resting places and turned them into sanctuaries of meaning. In some European caves, the bones of bears were arranged in patterns, skulls placed on rock ledges, jaws aligned as if in ritual. Whether these were acts of reverence or fear, no one can say. What is certain is that humans recognized something kindred in the cave bear's presence, a creature capable of stillness, of retreat, of enduring the dark. Perhaps that is why so many myths retain their shape. The bear became a symbol of sleep and rebirth, of strength contained within quiet. To ancient people, it was both ancestor and otherworldly guardian, a being that vanished each winter, only to rise again with the thaw. The cave bear, without knowing, gave humanity one of its earliest metaphors for the cycle of life. Even now, when scientists brush soil from their bones, the sense of intimacy remains. DNA whispers of adaptation to cold, of thickened fur and fat reserves that defied hunger's edge. Microscopic traces of pollen, found between teeth, speak of spring meadows, long vanished, of green remembered through extinction. Every detail tells of a creature both powerful and patient, a giant whose greatest act was to wait. When the last of them vanished, the caves did not empty. They became vaults of memory, dark, sacred, and self-contained. The air still holds the echo of breath, the faint musk of fur long gone. To step into that space is to feel the weight of a slumber that outlasted time itself. The cave bear may have disappeared, but its dream continues, embedded in the stone that once held its warmth. Outside, the world thawed and shifted. Forests crept back across the valleys, and sunlight reclaimed what darkness had kept. Yet beneath those mountains, a silence remains that feels alive, a heartbeat slowed to geologic rhythm. In that stillness, the story of the cave bear endures, not as a roar or a shadow, but as a lesson written in sleep, that even in surrender there is power, even in stillness. The memory of life continues to breathe. The musk ox, the last survivor. The musk ox is the Ice Age's final witness. Broad-shouldered and wrapped in a fortress of hair, it has survived every collapse that erased its kindred. Where mammoths and cave lions fell to silence, it endures a heartbeat carried from the deep cold into our time. In its heavy breath and frost-laden coat, the echo of the Pleistocene still moves beneath the Arctic sky. Unlike the beasts that ruled through strength or speed, the musk ox triumphed through endurance. Its life was not defined by dominance, but by persistence, the quiet refusal to vanish. When glaciers advanced and retreated, when grasslands became tundra and tundra became stone, the musk ox adjusted. It did not chase the changing world. It waited for the world to come back around. Its body, dense and compact, is an archive of adaptation, fur layered like sediment, hooves shaped for frozen earth, eyes that read the wind for warning. In the Arctic twilight, their herds form circles against the threat of wolves. Heads low, horns angled, they stand not in aggression but in unity. To attack one is to face all. This ancient formation, perfected over millennia, is both shield and ritual, a memory of survival written in muscle and instinct. Within that circle, calves rest at the center, the living promise of a lineage that began long before the first humans crossed into the north. The cold, to them, is not an enemy, but a companion. Beneath the snow, they sense the ghostly warmth of buried moss. They scrape the ice away with their hooves, uncovering food where no other grazer dares to search. The tundra is sparse, yet it provides just enough. Every bite is a negotiation with scarcity, every winter a conversation with death. And yet, as blizzards close the horizon, the musk ox remains unmoved, monumental, breathing in clouds of its own creation. In the fossil record, their ancestors once roamed from Siberia to Spain, from Alaska to the American Midwest. They shared the earth with mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and early humans who hunted and honored them. But when the Ice Age faded, their world shrank. Forests rose where grass once waved, and the musk ox retreated to the coldest corners of the map. What we see today in Greenland, in the Canadian Arctic, is only a fragment of what once was. To watch a herd move across the tundra is to see time itself travel. Their pace is unhurried, almost ceremonial, as if each step is placed with the memory of all who came before. In summer, when the midnight sun burns across the permafrost, their coats hang in heavy tufts, shedding the weight of winter. In autumn, the fur thickens again, dark and deliberate, preparing for another season of stillness. The rhythm of their existence is not dictated by clocks or calendars, but by the ancient pulse of the earth's breath expansion, contraction, and return. Humans have walked beside them for tens of thousands of years. In the hands of hunters, their hides became warmth, their horns became tools, and their presence became myth. For the Inuit and other Arctic peoples, the musk ox was more than sustenance. It was a symbol of fortitude, a creature that embodied the endurance of the land itself. Science tells us that their survival is precarious. Climate change, once a slow sculptor, now carves too quickly. Ice melts before calves can harden their hooves. Rain freezes into armor over the ground, sealing food away. The very adaptations that once saved them now teeter on the edge of failure. Yet the musk ox does not protest. It stands, as it always has, against the wind enduring, waiting for balance to return. In them lies a lesson older than civilization. Survival is not the triumph of the strongest, but the patience of those who endure. The musk ox is not the remnant of a vanished age, but its continuation proof that some lives are built not to conquer, but to remain. When we look into their steady eyes, we see what the Ice Age left behind, a calm defiance, a living monument to persistence. And when the snow drifts across the Arctic plains, erasing sound and colour alike, the herd gathers into its quiet circle. The storm moves above them, indifferent yet familiar, as it has for thousands of years. Within that living ring of warmth and breath, the ancient world endures not as memory, but as pulse and persistence. The last survivor stands against the wind, unbroken, while the earth tilts gently toward another dawn, an age where endurance will give way to grace. The giant deer, crown of the north. The snow thins, revealing open plains of brittle grass and morning frost. Out of that pale horizon, antlers rise vast, intricate, glinting like the bones of the sun. The giant deer, Megaloceros giganteus, once ruled these cold expanses not through might, but through the impossible elegance of its form. It was a creature of paradox, fragile and immense, a sculpture of survival, shaped by beauty itself. Its antlers stretched wider than a man was tall, sweeping out from the skull in layered crescents of bone. To carry them was both triumph and burden. Each winter, the weight became a gamble. If food ran thin, the energy needed to sustain such grandeur could mean death. Yet still they grew, season after season, nature insisting that even in hardship, splendor had a place. Their broad reach was not only for combat, but for display, a language of stature, light, and lineage. In the Ice Age's silence, these antlers were declarations, shimmering above the tundra like signals to the heavens. Where mammoths thundered and rhinoceroses carved paths through snow, the giant deer moved with deliberate grace. It belonged to the open country, where vision was survival. In herds, they drifted between melt and freeze, seeking tender shoots in the narrow summers. Their coats shifted from pale in winter to deeper hues in spring, blending with the rhythm of the earth's changing skin. They were wanderers of light, their lives dictated not by walls of ice, but by the brief windows of warmth that followed. The males clashed each autumn, their antlers locking with the crack of splintering wood. These duels were short, fierce, and ritualized. Strength was measured not by killing, but by endurance. The one who held firm longest claimed his place. Around them, the tundra echoed with the calls of mating, the air thick with musk and breath. When the battles ended, the plains fell quiet again, littered with shed fragments of antler that glowed under frost like relics from some forgotten cathedral. For early humans, the giant deer was both quarry and symbol. Its bones appear in Ice Age camps, scattered beside hearths that burn through endless winter nights. But the carvings and paintings suggest something more than hunger. They show reverence, curved lines capturing the antlers in motion, each arc drawn with careful awe. To kill such a creature was to take more than flesh. It was to challenge the divine architecture of the world. Its antlers became tools, art, and totems, reminders of the delicate line between survival and beauty. The end came slowly. As forests crept back and the open plains shrank, the very strength of the giant deer becoming its undoing. Trees tangled the air where once there had been wind. To move with antlers spanning 12 feet across was to risk entrapment. The forest punished extravagance. Males became ensnared among branches. Herds dwindled as grazing lands turned to thickets. Evolution, once their ally, fell silent. The grandeur that had drawn eyes across centuries became an anchor to extinction. Though long vanished, the giant deer lingered in human thought. Ancient stories told of spectral herds that appeared in the fog, their antlers blazing with starlight. In Ireland, peat bogs preserved entire skeletons, their bones arranged as if still in motion. When unearthed, these remains seemed too perfect to be real myth taking shape in the hands of modern man. The world they belonged to had melted away, but their image endured, caught between science and legend. What survives now is not just bone, but the idea of magnificence in adversity. The giant deer reminds us that survival is not always about efficiency. Sometimes it is about defiance, the insistence that beauty itself is a form of endurance. Its antlers were not mistakes of evolution, but expressions of possibility, an ancient argument between necessity and wonder. The plains lie empty now, save for the whisper of wind through grass and the soft collapse of snow under its own weight. But when the sun sets low and the frost catches light, there is still the faint illusion of movement, a shape passing beyond the edge of vision, crowned and unhurried. Perhaps it is only the echo of memory. Or perhaps, somewhere in the long northern dusk, the crown of the north still turns toward the fading warmth, carrying the Ice Age's final shimmer into twilight. The short-faced bear. Hunger without end. The cold plains of the Ice Age held many predators, but none inspired more unease than the short-faced bear. Taller than a man even on all fours, it stood as nature's unrestrained experiment in power. Its long limbs carried it across open tundra with terrifying speed, and when it rose to full height, it seemed to block the sky itself. Here was not the quiet grace of the cave lion or the noble endurance of the musk ox. This was hunger, distilled into form. It did not stalk the way modern bears do. The short-faced bear was a creature of distance, built to cross miles in pursuit of scent. With legs proportioned for a stride rather than weight, it could run faster than most prey, closing gaps that would have saved lesser hunters. Its muzzle, shortened and broad, gave its skull the look of something made for crushing rather than biting. The jaws could snap through bone, and the scent organs within its skull were immense. It could smell a carcass from beyond the horizon. Some say it was not a hunter at all, but a lord of scavengers, a tyrant of leftovers. Its size suggests confrontation, not stealth. A creature that drove others from their kills, relying on intimidation rather than ambush. Imagine a pack of dire wolves tearing at a bison's remains, then freezing as the shadow of something greater falls over the snow. The wolves retreat, the bear feeds. Because it hungered so greatly, its strength became its undoing. Such a body demanded vast territory, endless fuel. When the Ice Age began to unravel and prey grew scarce, its advantage turned hollow. It could not adapt to a world that required restraint. To live, it needed the very abundance that was slipping away. Hunger became its legacy, a gnawing that never ceased, even as the species itself starved toward oblivion. In bone and measurement, we see its dominance made tangible. Shoulder height, over 5 feet. Weight, more than a ton. A paw print the size of a human face. The bones tell us it was not slow, not clumsy. Its skeleton is built for motion, for ground-devouring strides across open ice. Some researchers suggest it could run as fast as a horse for short bursts, an impossible image until you see the angles of its limbs. It was the Ice Age's endurance predator, chasing exhaustion rather than speed. For early humans, this was a figure of terror and awe. The bear's presence shaped behavior paths avoided. Fires burned longer, and caves were chosen for shelter rather than warmth. They carved smaller bears into bone and ivory, perhaps in reverence, perhaps as a warning. No myths remain to tell their exact meaning, but the art hints at memory, of glowing eyes at the edge of the firelight, of breath that steamed through the dark, of footsteps that did not stop. Its extinction remains debated. Some blame competition with humans and other carnivores. Others point to the vanishing megafauna it depended on. In truth, it was undone by success. Its immense size, its unmatched sense of smell, its ruling dominance, all were adaptations for a world of abundance. When that world thinned, when the herds withdrew, and the carcasses disappeared beneath melting snow, its hunger found nothing left to claim. Even the strongest body cannot outlast an empty land, but the bones that remain refuse silence. Found in Alaskan permafrost and Argentine caves, they still radiate scale and intent. They tell of a creature that was never satisfied, whose very existence required more than the world could give. In their cold geometry lies the truth of the Ice Age, a time when survival itself was a form of war, when the line between predator and famine was paper-thin. Amid its grace, there is something almost tragic in the image it leaves behind. To imagine the short-faced bear is to imagine the peak of ambition within flesh, a body too great for its future, a hunger too vast for its age. It ruled until there was nothing left to rule. Its shadow faded not with violence, but with silence, swallowed by the slow thaw of a world it had once commanded. In the quiet museums where its bones stand assembled, that hunger still speaks. The long limbs stretch toward an invisible horizon, the jaws frozen mid-breath. Only the echo of pursuit, the ghost of an appetite too large for time itself. And as the glass cases reflect its silhouette, one cannot help but feel the faint unease of recognition that same hunger, still moving beneath the surface of the human world, waiting to be remembered. The saiga, the breath of the steppe. When the roar of giants faded and the snowfields began to soften, the steppe still breathed. Across the pale grasslands, herds of saiga antelope moved like wind, made visible thousands of amber bodies rising and folding with the rhythm of the earth. They were the pulse left behind after the mammoths, the quiet continuity that endured where power had failed. Their survival was not born from strength, but from the gift of motion itself. The saiga was a creature shaped by distance. Its world was not the forest or the mountain, but the endless in-between where horizon met sky and nothing offered shelter. To live there was to master impermanence. The animal's body was built for it, a domed nose filtering dust and cold, lungs tuned for the long run, legs meant to blur the line between presence and disappearance. While other beasts ruled by fear, the saiga's reign was through absence. It never lingered long enough to die in one place. Its face, almost comical to modern eyes, was an engine of endurance. That bulbous nose was no accident of nature. It was the key to surviving the steppe's extremes. In winter, it warmed frigid air before it reached the lungs. In summer, it filtered the dust storms that rolled endlessly across the plains. The saiga's strange beauty was a language of necessity, written by millennia of adaptation. To watch it run was to witness evolution at full speed. They moved in herds so vast that ancient hunters described them as rivers of life. From a distance, the saiga seemed to flow not separate creatures, but a single living current. Predators could not isolate them. Arrows lost meaning against such movement. Each life was small, but together they formed an unbroken pattern across the steppe. This was survival through multitude, not might. In a world once ruled by giants, the saiga endured through humility. To those who endured the Ice Age, the saiga stood as both salvation and symbol. Its flesh fed families through brutal winters, its hides became clothing and shelter, and its horns, later, would find purpose in ritual and trade. But beyond use, there was admiration. The saiga's migrations were signs of season and stability, proof that the world's pulse still held steady. When the sky filled with dust or snow, and the sound of hooves thundered across the horizon, humans knew that life still followed its ancient rhythm. For all its endurance, the saiga bore the cost in silence. To move meant to trust the land's vastness, to depend on grass that might vanish under drought or thaw. When the Ice Age drew to an end, the steppe began to change. Forests crept back into open plains, rivers shifted their courses, and the corridor of wind and grass narrowed with every century. the saiga retreated eastward, following the last remaining seas of grass into what is now Central Asia. The breath of the steppe grew shallow, but it never stopped. In the frozen soil of Siberia and the ancient valleys of Europe, their remains tell a story of quiet persistence. Unlike the bones of mammoths or cave bears, the saiga's fossils are small, delicate, and often found among human tools, a sign of coexistence rather than conquest. They remind us that not all survival is carved from dominance. Some creatures live by yielding, by flowing with change instead of resisting it. Even today, the saiga endures. Against plague, poaching, and the shrinking wilderness, its herds still run beneath the same wide sky. Their numbers rise and fall like breath itself, one generation lost, another returned. When they gather, their calls roll low and resonant across the plains, carrying the sound of deep time. The Ice Age is gone, but its rhythm remains in them. To see a saiga now is to glimpse a survivor from a forgotten chapter, a messenger from the world that once was. Its eyes hold the memory of cold suns and vanishing horizons. It does not know it is ancient. It simply runs, as it always has, toward open distance. Across the Kazakh steppe at dusk, the wind sweeps low, bending the grass in unison, as if remembering the herds that once turned the horizon into motion. The air fills with dust, the earth with vibration, and for a fleeting moment, the past and present breathe together. The steppe inhales, and through the ghostly rhythm of hooves, exhales its living memory. The woolly hyena, night's cold architects. There were no kingdoms of light in the Ice Age night, only the quiet dominion of the hunters who worked in silence. Beneath the frozen moon, where the scent of blood drifted farther than sound, the woolly hyena prowled like a craftsman of death. It was not chaos that guided them, but a kind of intelligence etched deep within the bone, the logic of endurance, of work done under endless cold. Their laughter, so often imagined as madness, was in truth a chorus of precision. In this frozen world, the hyena was not merely a scavenger. It was an architect of hunger itself, building its life from the ruins left by others. Where mammoth herds had fallen or cave lions had failed, the hyena made order from remains. Its jaws, wide as a bear's and stronger than any wolf's, could turn the unyielding into sustenance. Each bone it cracked was a design, a way to unlock what others left behind. It lived where even death was exhausted, reshaping the ecosystem through necessity. Unlike their African cousins, these hyenas thrived not through speed but through foresight, mastering the rhythms of migration and decay across thousands of miles of steppe. Few creatures moved with such quiet coordination. Their packs were webs of kinship and calculation, bound by purpose rather than chaos. A single cry could summon the group to a carcass half a mile away. They read the landscape like a script, tracking weakness and scent, mapping the habits of others across time and terrain. Each hunt, each night's labour, was not savagery. It was survival perfected into ritual. Archaeologists still find the traces of that discipline carved into the bones of Ice Age beasts. Mammoth femurs split open with deliberate symmetry, reindeer skulls crushed in patterns that speak of efficiency, not frenzy. Even the dens they left behind deep within limestone caverns or beneath river-cut cliffs show the marks of a people who understood structure. Layer upon layer of bones, sorted by species and purpose, tell a story not of chaos, but of control. The hyenas of the steppe were larger than those of Africa today, draped in pale, woolly coats that mirrored the snows they hunted within. Their massive shoulders and sloping backs gave them the look of beasts half sculpted from ice. They moved across the mammoth steppe with endurance unmatched, ranging far between kills, adapting to scarcity like sculptors of resilience. To them, hunger was not an affliction. It was the law by which the world turned. Recent genetic studies suggest their lineage splintered in waves. Adapting to different climates from Europe to Siberia, each group sculpted by the scale of winter itself. The cold sculpted everything into extremes. Lions became titans, wolves became runners, and hyenas became architects of the night. When food vanished, they endured by design, caching bones in secret places, returning when time had weathered the world's haste. Even the wolves feared their return, for the sound of that laughter meant dominion reclaimed. The hyena's reign was not about power, but persistence, the art of surviving what others could not. As climates shifted and rivals rose, the hyena's kingdom began to crumble. As the Ice Age waned and the green returned, the architects of hunger found themselves unneeded. Forests replaced the open plains that had once carried the scent of far-off death. The great herds withdrew to gentler lands, and with them went the rhythm of bone and silence that had sustained the hyena's kind. One by one, their dens emptied. The laughter faded from the valleys. Their presence has faded, but the memory remains quiet, persistent, unresolved. In the bones beneath our feet, in the echo of precision that shaped 1,000 hunts, the woolly hyena remains. It reminds us that intelligence wears many forms, that even in the bleakest night, life can organize itself into something enduring. The Ice Age did not belong only to strength or grace. It also belonged to those who built their survival out of the smallest remains, who turned hunger into architecture. If we could see beneath the buried snows of that forgotten steppe, we'd find a den holding its quiet archive bones, aligned like memory itself. There, the architects sleep, their work complete, their kingdom dissolved into silence. Yet in that silence lies the echo of their design, that life, even in its coldest hours, never stops building. The Megaloceros, jewel of shadows, the Megaloceros, or giant deer, was both a monument and a motion, a creature whose very form challenged the silence of the Ice Age plains. With antlers spanning wider than a man was tall, it was not a ghost of forests, but a living sculpture of endurance, a shape born to both rule and suffer the open tundra. Its presence turned empty horizons into theatres of survival. The Megaloceros did not flee from the cold, it belonged to it. Its coat shimmered between bronze and grey, blending with the brittle grasslands that stretched across Eurasia. Beneath that fur, muscle, and bone held the memory of forests long gone, when its ancestors had moved under green canopies and soft rain. But the Ice Age reshaped every living thing, and this deer answered with grandeur. Its antlers were not ornaments, but declarations, grown and shed like seasons themselves. Each winter tested that magnificence. Food vanished beneath the snow crust, and every movement became a wager between hunger and strength. The males, locked in rivalry, clashed even as scarcity deepened. Those battles were not for blood alone, but for the right to shape the next generation. When two titans met, the sound carried across frozen lakes, a hollow thunder that startled wolves and drew the eyes of watching crows. The duel was not always survived, but it was always remembered. Females moved differently through that world, measured, cautious, bound to the rhythm of migration and memory. They knew the routes where meltwater would soon return, where moss would break the snow first. In them lay the quiet genius of the species, the instinct to endure while others displayed. Around them gathered herds of smaller grazers, the saiga and reindeer, drawn by the same uncertain promise of spring. The Megaloceros stood among them like a relic of another order, too large for concealment, too beautiful for safety. Its antlers, though weapons, were also burdens. In harsh years, they became fatal weights, trapping the animal in thickets or draining its energy when forage was thin. Some fell while still crowned, their bones marked by the very splendor that defined them. Yet those antlers became the Ice Age's finest relics, found centuries later by human hands, still spreading outward like frozen trees. To lift one was to touch ambition made flesh, nature's experiment in magnificence. When humans entered its realm, the balance shifted. Hunters followed the herds with eyes trained by hunger and awe. Cave walls preserved their witness, antlered silhouettes etched in ochre and charcoal, proud and immense. The artists did not merely record what they saw, they conversed with it, shaping reverence into memory. To carve a megaloceros was to honor its defiance against extinction, even as that extinction drew near. The decline came quietly, disguised as change. Forests crept back over the plains, and the great deer found itself caught between two worlds too large for the closing woods, too visible for the open steppe. Its antlers, once symbols of dominance, became obstacles among trees. Starvation took more than predators did. The air warmed, the herds dwindled, and soon only echoes remained: bone, antler, and ash. No great creature ever vanishes in silence, nor did the megaloceros. In the myths of early people, its shape endured: a stag crowned by the sun, a guardian of seasons, a spirit that watched the earth's slow thaw. To them, it was not a beast that perished, but one that transformed. Each spring, when frost retreated and new antlers began to rise from the skulls of its descendants, the old giant seemed to stir again. What rises from peat and ice does not rise empty. Even the antlers remember light. They speak of a time when beauty and survival were the same pursuit, when the world rewarded grandeur and punished excess. The megaloceros remains a lesson in both, a creature too vast for the future it inherited. In the long silence that follows, the earth remembers its weight. Beneath moss and frost, the crowns of vanished kings still rest, marking where life once rose higher than the season would allow. Somewhere in that patient ground, the duel continues not of flesh and antler, but of memory and forgetting. The ground sloth of the north, it did not walk through the Ice Age, it pressed against it. Every step was an argument with gravity, each motion a slow declaration of existence. Where the megafauna of the north chased, fled, or stalked, the ground sloth simply endured. Its massive claws sank into frostbitten soil, as if to anchor itself to a world that was always threatening to shift beneath it. Unlike the predators that rule by fear, or the grazers that thrived in herds, the ground sloth's kingdom was patience. Its bulk towered above most creatures of its time, a living fortress of muscle and fur, moving through forests, glazed with ice and silence. It was not designed for speed, but for certainty. Its enormous forelimbs adapted for tearing bark, pulling down branches, and excavating roots trapped under frozen ground. Where others fled the cold, it shaped a life within it. Some bones tell of claws longer than a man's hand, curved like scythes for rending vegetation. Its teeth, dull and ridged, speak of a diet carved from scarcity: coarse leaves, frozen moss, the inner pulp of trees. Within its body, fermentation chambers turned the meager diet into power. This slow chemistry kept it alive through winters that erased entire species. It was a beast that turned time into energy. Not all ground sloths were southern giants. In the far north, Megalonyx jeffersonii, named centuries later for a curious statesman, roamed beneath the thin Arctic sun. It weighed as much as an elephant, yet fed on brittle twigs and lichens. It dug into permafrost, clawed into woodlands, and sometimes reared up on hind limbs to reach for the last green still clinging to life. It was both survivor and sculptor, reshaping the frozen forest through persistence alone. The sloth's presence was never dramatic. It did not roar or charge. It labored in silence, and in that silence the landscape shifted. Trees bent to its appetite. Clearings opened where it fed, and smaller species followed the scars it left behind. The Ice Age ecosystem depended as much on this quiet forager as on its mighty hunters. To study its remains is to realize that endurance itself was once a form of dominance. Few predators dared to challenge it. The cave lion and short-faced bear might have circled, testing its slow defense, but the sloth's reach was longer than expected. A single swing could shatter bone. Even in death, its body fed the steppe. Scavengers gathered for days, leaving trails of claw marks that still appear in sediment. Its bulk became a landmark, its decomposition a pulse of life in a frozen age. In caves and bogs, their bones still lie locked in ice, stained by minerals and time. Some are found upright, as though the creature had simply stopped mid-motion, frozen not by cold, but by the end of an era. Their skulls are long, almost human in profile, their eye sockets wide, their jaws serene. They look less like victims of extinction and more like sentinels, as if they had simply chosen to remain while the world moved on. For thousands of years, humans would walk among their shadows. Early hunters in North America encountered the sloth's trails, deep impressions in mud, claw marks in hollow trees, tunnels carved through underbrush. Some legends spoke of night giants, slow spirits of the forest that moved without sound but left the ground trembling. Perhaps they remembered, dimly, a truth buried in those stories, that this was a creature who had known the shape of the world before humans ever dreamed it. When the climate warmed, its slowness became a sentence. The forests it shaped turned to wetlands. The plants it fed upon withdrew. It could not chase the shifting seasons. One by one, its populations vanished, leaving only their footprints sealed in ancient riverbeds, immense, deliberate, like hieroglyphs of persistence. At present, the bones tell of a creature unmatched in its defiance of time. It was not made for glory, nor for speed, nor even for victory. It was made to last, to hold a conversation with the earth that outlived almost every other beast of its age. The ground sloth is gone, yet its lesson endures that strength can be quiet, and survival can mean standing still when everything else is running toward extinction. Buried beneath centuries of peat and frost, its form lies preserved in quiet sleep. The soil remembers the weight of its passage, the rhythm of its patience. The Ice Age has long since thawed, yet endurance itself endures in creatures that learn not to move faster, but to last longer. The Glyptodon, fortress of bone. At the end of the Pleistocene, nature experimented with endurance rather than speed. Across the plains of the southern continent, evolution carved forms meant to withstand pressure, not pursue it. Among them, one species turned survival into architecture, the Glyptodon, whose every curve spoke the language of protection. Each step pressed deep into the permafrost, leaving impressions like the stamps of a living relic. Beneath that armoured dome, warmth gathered in silence, a private hearth against the endless winter. The world of the Glyptodon was not one of speed or ferocity, but of structure and permanence. Where others fled the cold, it built its own fortress within its body, a shield that turned time itself into an ally. Long before humans carved their first shelters from stone, the Glyptodon had already perfected the architecture of defense. Its shell was a mosaic of thousands of interlocking plates, each a bone tessellation grown from within. It was evolution's cathedral, functional yet sublime, heavy yet precise. Every ridge, every seam spoke of pressure and patience, of the long conversation between life and landscape. When predators approached giant cats, dire wolves, or the claws of terror birds, they met not flesh, but fortress. But survival was never simply about resistance. Beneath its armor, the Glyptodon's world pulsed with quiet vulnerability. It grazed along rivers that once fed mammoth herds, its tongue sweeping frozen sedges into a mouth built for grinding eternity. It sought warmth not in the sun, but in community, gathering with others of its kind to share body heat in the open cold. In those gatherings, beneath drifting snow, the herd became a breathing citadel, a circle of domes, rising like a colony of earthbound moons. Its slow movement carried quiet influence. As it grazed and dug for roots, the Glyptodon reshaped the frozen plains, loosening compacted soil and spreading seeds through its wanderings. The weight of its shell pressed new paths into the tundra, and where its body rested, shallow basins later filled with meltwater. In this way, even its stillness had consequence, a reminder that in the long patience of Ice Age life, transformation often came not from speed or predation, but from the steady persistence of presence. As ages shifted and climates wavered, even the fortress began to falter. The ice retreated, rivers carved new paths, grasses turned thin and brittle beneath the heat. The Glyptodon's armor, once its greatest gift, grew heavy in the warming air. Its body, made for the measured rhythm of glacial time, could not match the quickening pace of change. Yet still it moved, slowly, insistently, across the new earth, a monument in motion, unwilling to yield. Some of its kind crossed land bridges and vanished into the southern forests, where descendants would one day meet humankind. There, the encounter was both awe and tragedy. To early hunters, the Glyptodon's shell offered refuge, shelter, even a roof against the rain. What had once protected life now served as its relic. The fortress became a home for others, its purpose rewritten by the new architects of the world. The bones that remain today tell a story not of extinction alone, but of transformation. Fossilized plates gleam under museum lights, their patterns echoing the geometry of frost, of scale, of eternity itself. In them, we see not just the shell of a creature, but the architecture of time, the way life builds itself against oblivion, only to become the foundation for what follows. And somewhere, deep in the layered earth, the Glyptodon still teaches through silence. It reminds us that survival is not merely to move or to fight, but to endure in form and spirit until the world changes once more. Beneath the turning soil, its bones lie arranged like the blueprints of resilience, each plate a testament to a moment when life chose endurance over escape. When the wind passes across the plains where it once lived, it whispers through the dust of those fortresses long crumbled. The echo is not mournful but measured, as if the earth itself still carries their rhythm. The fortress is gone, but its design remains in the armor of turtles, in the shells of armadillos, in the quiet persistence of all who carry their world upon their backs. The woolly rhinoceros calf, a body in the ice. It was not the roar of a predator or the echo of migration that revealed it, but a thawing stream in Siberia. Beneath the meltwater's trickle, a small form emerged, intact, complete, impossibly preserved. The calf's skin, darkened by time, still clung to its frame. Its horn, barely formed, curved like a promise never fulfilled. In that moment, the Ice Age reached forward through millennia and touched the present, reminding us that extinction is not disappearance, only waiting. The scientists who found it knelt in silence. Around them, the permafrost steamed in the low sun, releasing smells of age, musk, soil, and the faint sweetness of decay. Every brush of their hands unveiled not just bone, but memory, a creature no larger than a pony, born into frost, lost to it, and returned through its slow retreat. Its body was a message written in cold, sealed in time's deepest archive. The woolly rhinoceros calf belonged to a lineage of titans. Its kind once ruled the open tundra from Britain to the Pacific, armoured in hair and horn, feeding on tough sedges that only the cold could grow. Adults carried massive humps of muscle on their shoulders to swing their heads against the snow, clearing paths to graze. But this calf never grew into that burden of strength. Its short life was caught between seasons, a thaw too early, a freeze too deep, an accident in the endless negotiation between birth and ice. The world it was born into was fragile, teetering between freeze and thaw. Glaciers advanced and withdrew like breathing, and with every shift, herds were forced to relearn the shape of the land. Unlike bones shattered by predation or scavengers, this body lay whole. Even the eyelashes were preserved, curved delicately against a frozen cheek. There was something unnervingly human about its stillness, the way its legs curled beneath its chest as if in sleep. It reminded us that the Ice Age was not an age of monsters, but of living beings shaped by necessity, born into conditions we can barely imagine. In that permafrost cradle, scientists found traces of the calf's last meal, fragments of willow and dry grass, carried by a summer wind that has not blown in 10,000 years. These remains are more than artifacts. They are coordinates in the story of survival. They tell us of shifting climates, of herds wandering farther north as warmth failed them, of rivers that froze too soon. To read the calf's stomach is to read the Earth's pulse in reverse. Its preservation also speaks of time's strange mercy. The same frost that killed it kept its form untouched. In the Ice Age, death and memory were allies. What the cold claimed, it also protected. The calf's body now lies in a museum vault under soft light and glass, but in its stillness there remains motion, the idea of breath paused rather than ended. In preserving life so perfectly, the ice also froze the moment of loss itself, a paradox of beauty and grief suspended together in crystal stillness. Completeness is rare in the frozen north. The ice always withholds something. Most remains are fragments, a tooth, a bone, a twist of hair carried by meltwater into a river bend. The calf stands apart because it carries wholeness, the illusion of continuity. In that illusion lies our fascination, the belief that by finding what was lost, we might hold the world still for a moment and understand it. Under pressure and time, the ice begins to speak, its secrets rising in meltwater and bone. As permafrost thaws faster each year, the boundary between past and present thins. More bodies emerge, mammoths, wolves, even steppe bison, each one another, voice in the long silence of extinction breaking open. The calf was among the first of this chorus, a fragile herald of what lies beneath our warming world. What remains is not tragedy, but connection. Its body, delicate and intact, links two climates, two kinds of earth. It reminds us that survival is never eternal, and that even the smallest life can carry the weight of an epoch. When the scientists finished their study, they covered the calf once more, not with ice, but with light, and in that act, the Ice Age was reborn for a moment, breathing quietly beneath human hands. In the silence of ice, the beasts still seem to breathe their footprints preserved in frozen time, their shadows haunting the tundra winds. They remind us that strength is fleeting, that even the mighty can vanish when the world turns cold. Yet in their bones lies a quiet grace, a memory of endurance, of life refusing to yield. The Ice Age ends, but its echoes remain, carved into the frost of our imagination. If you enjoy exploring Earth's forgotten worlds, subscribe for more journeys into deep time.